Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's edition of Ask an Airstreamer is all about sharing the learnings of two Airstream owners and their lessons after almost a year of Airstreaming, along with the expertise of Airstream's National Service Manager, Dan Snyder. While a lot of the examples today will feature Airstream travel trailers, many of the lessons we'll share today also apply to Airstream's touring coaches. Before introducing our panelists, I want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Chris, and in addition to being an Airstream owner myself, I get to work with Airstream's brand ambassadors, helping to share their stories of adventure, curiosity, and exploration in their Airstream. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's session is being recorded and will be published on airstream.com next week alongside other editions of Ask an Airstream. In other words, don't worry about writing everything down. You'll receive an email to this video later next week. To submit your questions at any point today, go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom of this screen. We'll do our best to answer all of them, but if we run out of time, we'll share an email address at the end to submit your questions. After Q&A, we'll share a promo code for Airstream Supply Company, which is part magazine, part travel guide, and part outfitter. And lastly, there's a 2-question survey that will be emailed right after we wrap up today. We'd love your feedback so we can learn what you liked and things we could do better in future editions. So with that out of the way, let's meet our panelists. First, we have Lauren and Daniel, full-time Airstream ambassadors in their 2021 Airstream Classic. We have Adamo, Airstream Customer Council Member, who goes on weekend trips with his family in their 2020 Bambi. And we have Dan Snyder, Airstream's National Service Manager for travel trailers with 31 years of experience. All, thank you so much for taking time to join us. And Lauren and Daniel, I'd love to learn a little bit about where you are and what you're up to.
Thank you so much, Chris. First, we are crazy excited to be joining all of you today because it was not that long ago that we were 100% newbies. Daniel and I had gone into the nomadic lifestyle about 1.5 years earlier, and when COVID hit, decided that the RV life made sense for us in very stereotypical fashion, and chose Airstream specifically because of the quality of the product, and we just really loved what the lifestyle was all about. So we moved into our Airstream in November of last year, so we have now been full-time living in our 2021 Classic for a little over 8 months, and we absolutely love Airstream life. We do a YouTube channel. It's called Wander Local. As small business owners ourselves, we're really passionate about shopping local and shopping American-made products, which of course helps improve our economy. Another reason why we love Airstream is it's an American-made product, but we're just really excited to be here with y'all today. When we moved into our Airstream, we had never stayed the night in an RV in our lives. So we have literally made pretty much every newbie mistake under the sun. We've, smashed our taillight with the side of the Airstream. We have broken an awning. So hopefully we can share some of our stories today so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. But again, Chris, we're so excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you both for taking the time. And on the different end of the spectrum in terms of not full-time, but weekend warrior and part-time, we have Adamo. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending upon where you might be. My name is Adamo, as Chris mentioned, and about a year ago now, we were one of the fortunate few that may have got in before the pandemic rush of everything. But after a few years of looking at Airstreams with my wife, Clara, and my 2 small daughters, Kiara and Luna, we chose to pull the trigger in April of last year with our 16-foot Bambi to, originally really take advantage of like weekend trips. But then because of the pandemic, we were able to really take the whole working from home or working from the highway, as we turned WFH into over the months that went by, and took 2-3 month trips at a time, so that we were able to work and enjoy and making memories with the family. So again, really excited to be here today, share some of the stories that we've been through, and have a great conversation about it.
Chris, are you talking on mute again?
Sure was.
got
So
you.
thank you, Adamo. Thank you. So Adamo, thank you. And then next up, we have Dan Snyder, who's Airstream's National Service Manager. You might recognize him from Airstream's YouTube channel. But Dan has 31 years of experience, not only at Airstream, but is also a camper. So Dan, welcome, and just a little bit about your background before we hop in.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I started out on the floor as a riveter, worked my way into service, was a service tech for several years, got into customer support, and now I'm the national service manager for the trailer division. I come up with all the training materials for the technicians at the dealerships on how to fix things, how to make things better, or how to clean things like that. Also, like Chris was saying, I do a lot of the videos on the airstream.com on the trailer side on how to use different things in your trailer. So been doing this for over 31 years now and enjoy it. And again, I also camp on the weekends as well. And so I see both sides of the industry, not only as a builder, but as a user as well.
Awesome. So great variety of experience and perspectives from our panelists. And as the title of this Ask an Airstreamer is called 10 Things Every New Airstreamer Should Know, we'll just hop in here with the first one. And it's this idea of camping local. A lot of folks you'll read on the forum, they'll take delivery of their Airstream and let's go do a 2,000-mile road trip. So I know that each of you has a little bit of a perspective on this. Lauren and Daniel, I'll start with you in terms of what does camp local mean for the two of you?
Sure. So we were those people. When we first picked up our Airstream, we had never towed anything near the size of our Classic. But even though we hadn't had much experience, we decided we would trek from Tampa, Florida, which is where our home base is, all the way to Townsend, Tennessee in the Smokies in just a handful of days. Everybody told us, don't do it, take more time, but we were like, we're on a mission. We got to go. And we did it, and it was miserable. Mostly because poor Daniel, who drives our trailer with our Ford F-250, was like white knuckling it the whole way. We were so nervous.
True.
And then when we got to the campgrounds, we were fumbling around, didn't really know our rig yet. And so there was a lot of stress that we put on ourselves that really wasn't necessary. What we should have done or could have done to save ourselves some of that hair pulling out would have simply been to either park our Airstream in, say, if we don't have a driveway, we don't have a home, but if we had, that's what we would advise to do. We have friends who we've told to do that now. Go without electric and water for a day. Like, just get used to your rig. When we picked up our second Airstream, we actually camped at a local campground that was close to my dad's home, which is where all of our stuff was at that point in time, which also made it a lot easier to move. We took a full week to do it and didn't rush it. So don't get too excited. You're going to be excited. It's impossible not to be excited. But making sure that you take the time to get and know your rig is really important to reduce the stress levels as a newbie Airstreamer.
And I would only add to that, when you're going on vacation, you typically pack things in a suitcase, and you're always thinking to yourself, geez, I think I forgot something. But when you're packing an Airstream, you're packing so much more than a couple of suitcases. So you're always going to forget something. So if you camp close to home, you can always run back and pick those things up.
Yeah.
Great advice. Adamo, what's this mean for you?
Well, I'm definitely in the camp of do as I say, not as I do, because I made the same mistake. We picked our rig up and went on a 5,000-mile journey 3 days later. So we, and that's for somebody, that's for some people, right? Where you end up learning along the way, and that's enjoyable. But for others, that might not be as enjoyable, and actually taking the time to learn more about how it all works. And I think that the two major lessons learned are really understanding what's going on with your tanks and what's going on with your battery and your electric power, and knowing how those things are gonna, treat you over a few day or a week period of time, so that you can plan your trips more accordingly as you move forward. So definitely staying local, I think, is a good approach for newbies starting out.
Awesome. So The second thing that we put together in this presentation is really around towing. And there's a lot of questions. I remember when I drove mine home, I white knuckled. I probably didn't sleep the night before, part excitement, part nervousness of driving 27 feet behind me. So there's a lot of things that you can do, not only to make yourself comfortable during that process, but also to have some information before you even go to connect the tow vehicle to the travel trailer. So Adamo, I'll start with you on this idea of taking it slow and do what's comfortable for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first and foremost, if your vehicle needs a towing system, start that process a few weeks or even a few months out. So prior to your delivery date, and talking to your Airstream dealer as really being the experts so that they can help you do your homework and determine the right equipment for not only your rig, but also for your towing vehicle. And then that'll just allow you to have a much more pleasant point when you actually bring those two things together. So the two words that always come up for me are patience and safety when it comes to towing and finding your comfort zone. And again, everyone's comfort zone is different when it comes to towing. So, figure out what you're comfortable with, and then that's going to make your whole life a lot easier and pleasant along the way. So having the right towing vehicle and knowing the load limits of your touring coach, if that be the case, is really critical to the safe and comfortable driving experience. So when it comes to how do you really choose wisely when it comes to your vehicle to tow your Airstream, it's looking at really these few questions and understanding what the answers might be. So how many people typically come along? This actually has the potential to add a lot of weight to your overall capacities. And this will help determine how many seats you need in your tow vehicle, how much storage space you require, especially for the longer outings. What do you usually take with you? Stuff in all ways, shapes, and form, whether it be in your trailer, on your trailer, in your tow vehicle, on your tow vehicle, all weighs something. And stuff also includes what you bring with you in your tanks. So knowing how much weight all of those things actually contribute are really quintessential in ensuring the safety and enjoyment of your trips. And then lastly, what other purposes does your tow vehicle really want to serve? Is it your daily commuter? Is it your work vehicle? Is it part of your full-time lifestyle on the road? Because the tow vehicle that serves more than just the singular purpose of towing has the potential to bring you much greater value and enjoyment to your Airstream experience over time.
And I can add a little bit of context. I learned this the hard way. So I was solving for, I have a 27-foot International, and I was trying to solve for daily driver, and then also a vehicle I could use to tow the Airstream. And I towed with a vehicle that probably was a little bit too small, and while it fit in parking garages in the city, and it was great to zip around and run errands when I wasn't Airstreaming, what I realized is that I would go on these trips and the towing experience wasn't fun, I should say. And I would arrive at the campsite distressed because the driving experience was, a white knuckle driving experience for 4 hours before I arrived. So, knowing this and asking those right questions on what you want to do is really, really good advice. This next slide, Adamo, is on hitching.
Yeah, so when we look at hitching, the cute little kids that you may have seen in the initial slide, I just tell them to go away and play when it comes to hitching, because clearing out any and all distractions and really staying focused on what it is that you're doing is the most important thing, because this is really the thing that's going to define the safety of everything else. Is what happens between your tow vehicle and your trailer. So I always make sure to clear out the distractions, really focus on developing a routine and then sticking to that routine every time over and over again. And actually my wife and I, when we do have the opportunity, do it together as well, so that we have two eyes on it. And then it allows for the flexibility of either one of us to do it when something else might be happening. So, taking it slow, having the patience and finding that routine. And then the last thing I would like to also mention is, once everything is together, and as far as the hitching is concerned, doing the final walk around, not only of what's happening with the hitch, but the entirety of the rig, to ensure that really everything that you need to be taken care of is taken care of. And then that gives you the peace of mind to get in the driver's seat and take off and enjoy the ride.
There's
And,
one
you know,
thing that I
one-
want to add to that slide,
Oh,
Adamo.
yeah,
It's
right.
that, you know, it's something I wish somebody would have told us, because at this point we've hit over 30 campgrounds. You're towing an Airstream, and it's a super cool thing. So when you pull into a campground, people are going to automatically want to talk to you, because people are friendly. Campers are friendly. And me personally, when I'm hitching up or unhitching, I always have people walk up to me and I always say, just apologize. Just give me a few minutes to go through my, checklist, and then I'll be right with you. I promise. But to Adamo's point, you really want to kind of eliminate any distractions, because you don't want to deviate from your checklist.
Yeah, and the idea of a final walk around, and I see triple check is on the slide here. Like, I've made a few mistakes trying to move the trailer where certain things are still down and then they were not there anymore. So great to always take it slow and triple check. The other piece when it comes to having a safe towing experience is around knowing the speed rating of a tire. So each tire, not just on the travel trailer, but any tire has a speed rating that's listed on the sidewall. I know that most of the folks here are probably newer Airstream owners, so they're would fall on the right side of this slide where it's 2017 and newer. Airstream models have a speed rating of about 87 miles an hour. Some older Airstreams had a lower speed rating of about 65. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're obeying the speed limit and towing safely, but just being mindful of the capabilities of the tires that are on your vehicle, and then when it's time to replace them, making sure that you're getting something that's the same. We talked a lot about towing and weights. I just want to talk a little bit about what some of these things mean. We'll drop a link in the chat to a blog post that Airstream has published on this that basically gives this information with much more detail. But just to walk through some of the commonly referred to kind of towing terms, there's the gross vehicle weight rating, which is all the people and all the stuff. What's the maximum allowable weight of your tow vehicle or and your Airstream? There's the tow rating, which is the maximum weight that can be safely kind of towed or pulled behind a tow vehicle. There's hitch weight, also sometimes referred to as tongue weight. This is the amount of weight that can be placed on that the trailer's tongue places on the back of the tow vehicle. You have unit base weight. This is how much the Airstream weighs, basically when it's shipped from Jackson Center. Nothing in the tanks, no propane, kind of empty without all your stuff. You have net carrying capacity, which is the total weight that you can carry with stuff in the Airstream. Obviously you can't have people in the back while you're towing, but when you put all your stuff in there, your tanks, all that stuff, how much capacity do you have to tow? And then there's the occupant and cargo capacity, which is really targeted for motorized vehicles. So some terms just to be familiar with. Again, a link to the chat that breaks this down in more detail. And the next piece before we switch over to lesson number 3 here on towing is really around weight distribution hitches. 2 graphics at the top. One is without a weight distribution hitch, or perhaps a improperly set up weight distribution hitch. And then the one on the right is everything straight and level with the weight distribution hitch. But one way that you might know you have an improperly set up one, or one that is or that you need one, is if you've ever towed and you have your daytime running lights on and someone thinks your high beams are on because the nose of your tow vehicle is aimed up. That's a good indication that you might want to revisit the towing experience. But I know each of you have weight distribution hitches, so just a quick, Adamo, I'll start with you. What's your approach to this? What's the experience been?
So we have in the whole scheme of things, right, with a 16-foot Bambi, we have a relatively small and lightweight package compared to what you can end up with, as Lauren and Daniel are well aware of with their rig. But even with the small rig, it makes an enormous difference to have that weight distribution hitch between your tow vehicle and your rig. It makes for a far better driving experience, and it's actually much better on your vehicle and on your rig to be more in the right-hand side image as opposed to the left-hand side image, because you're just dealing with a lot of suspension issues on your actual tow vehicle if you're doing that for a long trip. And I know this from example because when we took off, that's pretty much what my situation looked like from here all the way through the Tetons, Yellowstone, all the way through South Dakota, and made it to Chicago. And we had some issues I had to deal with on the tow vehicle. So weight distribution hitches all the way.
And us personally, I will be the first to admit that when we purchased our Airstream and they told us we needed a weight distribution hitch, they really had to sell me on it, because I just looked at it as an added expense. And I said to myself, do I really need it? And I am so fortunate that the Airstream of Tampa dealership talked us into it, because I have zero regrets. Literally, and most recently, we were in West Texas during a windstorm, and the winds were gusting between 55 and 70 miles an hour. And that is scary in itself, but legitimately, there were no worries. We had a camper pass us that was sort of sideways when it passed us, and I was just absolutely terrified for them. But I'm so glad that we at least had the weight distribution hitch. We invested in it properly. There are a couple of things that I will add to the weight distribution hitches, especially as a newbie. You have certain parts of the hitch that are metal on metal, and they do make noise. So the last thing you want when you're at a campground is you coming into the campground and it's going, like we've all been there, right? And you're going to see other campers like that. Invest in some grease and some lubrication, and keep the joints lubricated. Keep your ball hitch covered. Travel with extra hitch pins. I myself have been guilty of unhitching and putting the hitch pins on the bed of the truck and then driving to go get gas. Not a good idea. If we had lost those pins, we would have been in trouble. So just carry some extra pins. Equalizer, which is the hitch that we have, has these $20 like plastic brackets that fit in between the metal to metal joint. That makes a world of difference. It keeps it nice and quiet. And that's what I would add about weight distribution hitches. Definitely not a want. I would consider it a need.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this is all supposed to be fun and safe. So if there are pieces that you can put in place to ensure that, all the better. Dan, a question for you specific to the equalizer hitch system. Owner wants to know, is it required that the Airstream, that you remove the sway bars or those torsion bars before you back up? And then is it okay to disconnect them before everything is level?
Yes, I always, when I did a lot of traveling with my camper, everybody knows how loud and noisy those weight distribution hitches are. And I always felt guilty trying to back my trailer into my spot, making all that noise. So a lot of times if I had the time and I wasn't holding people up, I would pull up, get out, take those two bars off, and then back it into my campsite. So and then it makes it a little bit easier. It's not so rigid to back and turn. I could get it in there a little bit better quietly. And it seemed to work out pretty good for me, but that's either way is fine. That's just how I like to do it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. This next one, so we've talked about camping local. We've talked about this section has all been about towing, and we start to now get into setting up at camp. And Lauren and Daniel, you have some experience and expertise. We'll start with you, and I know Adamo has a point of view on this as well.
Leveling is one of the things that I've become OCD about. When we first started, probably our first 2 or 3 campgrounds, we were not level. And Lauren would always come out and go, I don't think it's level. And you don't necessarily know until you have some proper equipment, but legitimately one time she dropped an onion on the floor and it just rolled straight to the back. And I said to myself, okay, yeah, we're clearly not level at this point. So I'm going to have to learn how to make this thing level.
Well, and another really good indication that you're not level is that your doors, like your bathroom door, doesn't actually like click close. So between the onion test and the bathroom door, that's a pretty good starting point for just absolutely knowing that you're not level yet.
Yeah, and another really important aspect to being level is that, if you just think about water in a gallon jug, imagine the sensors on one side of that gallon jug. If you were to tilt the jug, well, the sensor's not going to have the same reading as if it were level. And that is something that we found to be true. So also keeping it level provides you the most accurate measurements from all of your tanks, which is really, really important. Trying to think of some other things, before, and I think this is for an important aspect, at least for us, before we ever get into tackling the levelness of everything, we go and I jump out of the truck and I go to assess the spot first. Because the last thing you want to do is back into a spot that is so uneven that you're never going to be able to level. Or secondarily, there are other important aspects as well. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll take the surge protector and I'll plug it in and make sure that it kicks out no errors. There are a couple of instances where it's kicked out not properly grounded error, and we've had to relocate campgrounds or campsites. So the last thing you want to do is spend an hour breaking down and then find out when you plug in your power that you have to move again. I mean, you don't want to do that. So just use your surge protector as a tool to test the power, and I typically just test the water as well. Another thing I do is I will get out and I will look for the most level aspect of that spot. It's, when you back into a concrete platform, it's pretty much almost always going to be level. But that's not always the case when you're boondocking, or some campgrounds just have loose gravel as well. So you want to find a very level surface to start before you start to get into the process of leveling.
And a lot of what we're talking about here when it comes to leveling and where the effort really is leveling the vehicle from side to side or passenger side to driver side, that left to right motion. Front and back's pretty easy, right? Tongue jack up and down. If you have an Airstream that has an electric tongue jack, super easy, just press that button. Adamo, anything that you wanted to add to this in terms of your experience out there?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that we tend to do a lot of boondocking, and so like there's the other aspects that we look at on top of just leveling when we find a spot is really what does the experience want to be, and what is the orientation of our rig going to be to best highlight the sun angle, right? Where do you want to wake up and be looking at? Because you really want to get it right, and factor that in, factor the leveling in, factor all this stuff, so that once you set it, then you're there to enjoy your time in whatever that place is. So, just looking at all the different factors and taking the time to process those is worth the extra 15 minutes, and then doing it right so that you can spend the next days or week really diving in and enjoying the time there.
Awesome. So we've talked about the importance of it. Here are some tools that help make it easier. Just a quick disclaimer, there are some brands on the screen. No one has affiliate relationships or any connections to these brands. So these are just ones that these folks use. So Lauren and Daniel, kind of walk us through what we see on the screen.
Perfect. So as you said before, leveling front to back isn't that difficult. You're going to use your electric tongue jack to do that, just raising and lowering it. We have found that certain campgrounds require us to be a lot higher. And while you can just use the jack, we tend to use this Anderson. It looks like a bucket, really. It just gives you a higher starting point so that you don't have the electric jack fully extended. So that's one thing that we use as a little tool to level front to back. But left to right is typically where we're going to spend the most time trying to level. Again, you'll see it on the screen here. The Anderson camper levelers are great. We pair that with the LevelMate Pro, and what it does, it gives us a reading from inside the truck. So typically when we get to a campground, Lauren will jump out and she'll put the Anderson levelers, they're kind of like curved in between or on one side, and then that's whichever side is that needs to be raised up. And then she'll put one, because we're dual axle, of course, she'll put one behind each wheel, and then we'll slowly start to back up on the Anderson levelers until we see that it's level. And then instantly what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll add our rubber chocks right after that. And that's one of the ways that we get our camper left to right, perfectly level.
One thing that I would say is that we have walkie-talkies as well that we use when we're doing this whole thing. There have been quite a few campsites, because we're going all over the place, that don't have great cell phone service. So using your phones isn't as convenient as always having that walkie-talkie, which has really, the range is next to nothing for that. So that's another thing that we use as we're leveling the Airstream, to talk back and forth and know what's going on and communicate well.
And this is a very, very, very important thing. If you remember nothing else from this conversation, the stabilizing jacks are not for leveling. They're not for leveling, right? They're literally just there to stabilize the camper once it is already level. You're going to see other stabilizers at campgrounds that are bent. It's because they tried to use them as levelers. They're not there to level. They're there to stabilize. It's a very important thing that I wish somebody would have told us. We've never had any issues, but it's just very important to know.
I see Adamo grinning, so I'll give him a chance to add to the conversation.
I was just couldn't agree more on on that point, and just, you know, the importance of knowing that they are, you know, what levelers are and what stabilizers are. And I was just laughing because those are two words that my 4-year-old daughter loves and actually knows the difference between, because we say them and clearly delineate what they mean to her in a meaningful way. So if we can teach a 4-year-old, hopefully we can teach anyone.
And just to orient, we've talked about the LevelMate Pro on the screen. Obviously, the right is the application that you run on your mobile device, and then the thing on the left is something that you install and calibrate and lives inside the Airstream. So just a little background on that. And we also mentioned good communication is key. So I think one of my favorite shirts is sorry about all the things I said when we were parking the camper, because it's easy to get sideways in some of those. So this next lesson, or things that, you know, people should know, is that there are plenty of places to camp. And I think this is really important, because all too often we hear about campgrounds booking up in seconds as soon as they're released. So this next part is really around, you know, finding a place to camp. We'll also drop a link here in the chat on a webinar that we did on, or an Ask an Airstreamer that we did on how to find the best boondocking spots. So Adamo, I'll start with you in terms of, you know, charting the course and this idea on picking where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, for us, we really take the philosophy of dream up your adventure first, and then chart the approximate course. And not really, and the reason why I say approximate is because, you know, you're planning an adventure, you're planning a journey, and you might have an idea of what that wants to be. And actually, ironically, that the course on the left-hand side there is almost exactly what we did last summer for 3 months. So when I saw this, I was like, wow, somebody actually got into my phone and figured out what my course was. But, you know, you end up deviating a little bit of that from that, and that's okay, because you're leaving space to kind of let the adventure unfold. So we start with kind of charting the course using, whether it's Google Maps or Road Trippers, or there's another, you know, there's many other wonderful apps and sites out there that can help you really kind of chart that course. And then from there, then you move to like really understanding, like, do I want to be in the national parks? You know, do I want to use the national forest? Do I want to boondock? Do I want to be in more dedicated campgrounds? And you then use that whole collection of tools, right, to bring it to life.
Looks like I went too fast there. Speaking of some of the tools, here's a quick kind of accounting of some resources that are out there. Adamo, I'll start with you on walking us through some of these.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think it's really knowing kind of your toolkit of potential experiences, and then being able to shake it up and use them all to create the experience that you want, and varying between kind of the vast array of different booking platforms and the types of stays that keep your journey sort of fresh and exciting along the way. Because, you know, sometimes you're going to need to be plugged in, you know, sometimes you're going to have to dump your tank, but maybe that's not all the time, right? So then that gives you kind of several other opportunities for the ways in which you might want to stay. So I kind of, Lauren and Daniel, as full-timers, I'd love to hear how you all approach planning and the tools you find most useful.
Sure. So when Daniel and I first hit the road, our goal was to hit 50 states in 365 days. that was moronic. We just didn't have enough experience to know that moving one state per week would not only be exhausting, but we have full-time jobs, so we work on the road. So we quickly realized that trying to move that quickly was not only stressful, but not even fun. We weren't even getting to really experience the places we were at. So there are a couple different things that we've learned as far as planning our trips that's really, really important. First, you really want to watch the weather. And if you have joined us on our YouTube channel, you saw that we got stuck in Texas during the winter freeze, which was less than fun because we really didn't know our rig well when it happened. So we made some really goofy mistakes. So being aware of the weather, especially if you're not going to be at campgrounds or not, you're going to be boondocking. You don't want to boondock in 90-degree weather. We're in Joshua Tree this week. We were planning on the second half of the week being boondocking, but it's in the 90s and they weren't expecting that. So we ended up staying in a campground. So the weather is a really, really important thing. But as far as how we look at our full-time planning, we look and we say, okay, what's around us? For us, we've decided that we have a pretty solid rule of we don't like to travel more than 3 to 4 hours towing the Airstream at one given time. So that gives us a radius around wherever we are for where we want to move next. I will say that Harvest Hosts is one of our favorite go-tos for if we decide, okay, we have friends who are going to be in Vegas this week, and that's 8 hours away, but we really want to go see them. So what we'll do is we'll break that up with a Harvest Host and we'll drive 3 hours, stay overnight, relax, enjoy the local, fares of whatever that Harvest Host has to offer, and then move on the next morning. What's great about that is you don't have to unhitch, makes it super easy, and you just keep going. So knowing how long you like to travel at one given time is really important for making the adventure fun. Now, as far as all of these options for campgrounds, we are definitely not super insanely proactive planning people. We would define ourselves as reactionary Airstreamers. We're more of the people who are going to jump on YouTube and figure out what we did wrong and fix it than read the whole manual kind of people. And I think most people fall in either one or two of those camps and maybe a little bit of in between. So because of that, when we're booking campgrounds, it usually is kind of last minute. Having any more than 2 or 3 weeks of campgrounds in advance almost never happens for us. So I am obsessed with Google My Maps. That's how I track all of our adventures. But calling local campgrounds, I always like to jump on Google and search for campgrounds. I'll change the star rating so that it's 4 stars and up, and just start picking up the phone and calling. One of the things that I learned pretty quickly when we were going through this planning process is that not all of their online systems are really correct. So you can go to a website and see that they have no availability. You pick up that phone and call, and they might. I know, especially like for my generation, like we don't pick up the phone to do anything other than like text and scroll through Facebook. But picking up that phone and calling the campgrounds, you can typically find somewhere a lot faster that way than doing it digitally. But we love HipCamp. It's kind of like the Airbnb of RV life. I've already spoken to Harvest Host a little bit. We use Campendium very often when we want to find a boondocking spot. When we are boondocking, I always plan on us being at least at a campground that's relatively close to there for at least a day or two, so that we have the ability to go and scout the spot, because sometimes you'll find a spot that you don't really feel comfortable about the surroundings. Trust your gut there. We've never had any kind of issue when we've camped at a spot that we felt comfortable at. You want to see what the terrain looks like, so that's important. So we like to find a campground to be able to scout it and then go boondock for a week.
And I think Adamo, I think you would agree, these are all tools in a toolbox. I mean, really just get familiar with the tools and then learn how to best leverage them for your own adventure.
Yeah, agreed.
So this next kind of building on this and really around pace, and there's a couple of different ways that we can interpret the 5th thing that every new Airstreamer should know, and this idea that slow is fast. Lauren and Daniel, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I spoke to that a little bit just a minute ago. Daniel and I have decided that 6-hour trips or 8-hour trips are super easy when you're just road tripping it and not towing anything. But add your Airstream, and it's exhausting. So really, I mean, maybe you don't even want to travel 3 to 4 hours. Maybe you want to travel 2, and so you stay a little bit shorter and keep moving on. It's really important to know what your limits are and don't push them. It's really not fun to do so. I mean, you're going to run into situations like right now, we're all the way out in California. Our plan is to go up the California coast, but we are going to be going to an Airstream rally in Lebanon, Tennessee in July. So we're going to have to move a little bit faster than we like to. So it does happen, but really take the time to slow down. And then also, if you're working while you're camping, make sure that you plan on spending a little bit more time than you would in one spot than you would if you were just vacationing. It may be great to go somewhere for a week on vacation, but you're going to have that day when you end up staying in the Airstream from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. just working your butt off, and it is what it is. That's part of the power of this lifestyle. You can do it that way. But if you only stay there a week and you have a couple of those days, you don't get to adventure and experience the culture of the place that you're in, which is really disappointing. So if you know you're working on the road, staying somewhere a week or 2, maybe even 2 weeks or longer, really is at least how we enjoy doing it.
Adamo, tell us about this idea of leaving space for the unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for us, that's always been sort of the primary goal, no matter what we do, when we take the Airstream out, is that we're leaving time and space for the unexpected, the unplanned, and really the unknown to take center stage in as part of the journey. Because, for us anyways, that's really where the journey kind of gets exciting. And it's where like life becomes living. And this is where like a good day can really become a phenomenal day. A feeling becomes actually an emotion, and that like vivid and lasting memory comes to life. And you're talking now about like really the lifelong stories that can happen. And so if you don't leave time for that fun stuff to happen because of all the great tools that you can plan every minute of every day with, then you kind of got to take a moment and step back and say, well, why am I doing all this in the first place? And it's the Airstream lifestyle that allows that freedom to unfold. So embrace it and enjoy it.
Lesson or thing number 6 here is really around Airstream power systems. A lot of discussions and conversations that we see in forums and on Airstream Addicts and a bunch of other places. This is really trying to understand, what can I operate when I'm boondocking and I'm using solar and my battery system? What can I operate with the inverter on, things like that. So we'll drop a link to an Ask an Airstreamer that we did with Airstream's head of product development and engineering that goes deep on Airstream power systems. These next few slides are really just a very high level overview on how things work. So this first slide, the chart on the right, for those of you who have lead acid or AGM batteries, this is meant to interpolate the voltage that you see on the screen. Most of you, unless you have a classic, probably see a gauge that's on the top left, the sea level tank monitor. Hitting that bat button will display a voltage. And then the chart on the right gives you an idea of what that voltage means versus how much capacity or the state of charge of your battery. So just a quick tool. The important thing to note here in lead acid and AGM batteries, you can get about 50-ish% out of the total energy that's stored in that battery before damaging it. Going below that threshold, you can quickly shorten the life of your Airstream's battery if you have a lead acid or AGM. And Dan, I know that you have a lot of experience in this. Anything you want to add to this slide?
Yeah, I would try to, if you're doing a lot of boondocking, I would try to learn habits. So when I use these items together, I use this much battery power, because you can learn more habits than you can trying to write everything down. So if I know that if I watch 3 movies in a night that I use this much percentage, you might want to cut back on how many movies you watch or the inverter time that you're using and those kind of things. So it's a lot of trial and error, because everybody uses the products differently. And so, it's learn how you use it and how you need to adapt on how you're using it.
And then to build on that is the lithium option that is an option now at Airstream dealerships. It's Airstream Power Pro. Slightly different, or not slightly, very different kind of energy density and chemistry in the battery. You'll see in the chart on the right, before our threshold was about 50% in terms of how much energy you can pull out of that battery. In lithium, because the chemistry is different, you can actually get a lot more usable energy out of the battery system. So again, the chart on the right starts to give you the interpolation between voltage and what does that mean from state of charge. One more slide here to just round out Dan's point on how do you know how much energy I'm using? I'll just speak quickly to this again. If folks who want to go a little bit deeper on this, that link that's in the chat on power systems is an hour just on this topic. But if you start to look at trying to understand how much power are different things using, the common denominator in understanding all this is really converting things to watts. Many appliances, if you look at the back of them or in the manual, it'll tell you how many watts it uses. But for those who don't, some equation or conversion formulas on the left. Just to walk through an example, you're watching the TV for an hour. It's 120 volts because it's running off of the inverter or plugged into the AC socket. That TV uses 1 amp, and then to get to watts, it's 120 volts times 1 equals 120 watt hours. So you watch TV for 1 hour, 120 watt hours, 2 hours, 240 watt hours. So that's one example on the AC side. Let's say you're going to use a gas furnace, switching over to the right-hand side now, that operates on the 12 volt or DC side of things. We have a 12 volt furnace that uses 7 amps when it's running. So 12 times 7 is 84 watt hours. Run it for 2 hours, you just double that number. So starting to understand the tools of how do I really understand what I'm using in my vehicle. We've done some of the work for you here to make things easy. So here is the common Airstream loads. The first column on the left are appliances and devices that come standard or shipped with most Airstreams. So air conditioners, refrigerators, things like that. And then moving over to the table on the right, things that everyone might bring in their Airstream. So little cheat sheet on this. Again, we go deep on this in another Ask an Airstreamer that's on Airstream's Power Systems. This next one I know Dan is very passionate about. This is the idea of an ounce of prevention. And the first piece here, and I'm sure everyone has it bookmarked and printed and sits on the coffee table inside their Airstream, is actually the manual. A lot of great information here. A team of folks who work in Jackson Center putting these things together for every Airstream model. The thing that I like to do is on the left, there's a way that you can download the PDF version of every manual and parts book for all Airstreams. So there's a link on the bottom how to get there directly. But what I like about that approach is it's a PDF and I can actually search for keywords either on my computer or on my phone. So if I'm looking for an issue, it takes me right to that page. And then once you do that, you'll actually see on the right-hand side a maintenance schedule for different systems that you should either check or maintain. The thing that's a little bit unique in an Airstream travel trailer, because it doesn't have an odometer,
Hey, Chris,
is that you have kind of 2 different intervals. Yeah.
our slides aren't moving.
Oh, what are you guys stuck on?
We are
What do you
stuck
see
on
now?
watts can I run?
Okay, let's try to get it moving. Did it
While you're
change?
working on that, I will make a small note about the electrical side of things. And we giggled about this with Adamo as we were going through this. Adamo, and we said, we don't really want to learn all this information. So just know that although if it gets you really excited, more power to you, but don't let this be something that impedes your adventure. You will just get used to watching your battery and seeing where you're at. You'll get used to, if I'm going to make a smoothie in the morning, what does that take and how much can I handle? So we've both been traveling almost a year and don't know all of these calculations and are still having amazing and powered Airstream adventures. So don't get too stressed out looking at those numbers, because those are definitely not something that get me excited or any of your other panelists. You're going to be fine. Adventure on.
That's right. Yeah, good addition there. I think you should be able to see the maintenance slide now. Thumbs up. Okay, great. So on the left is how to get the PDF version of the manual. And on the right, it's just a sample maintenance schedule for a classic. You'll see here miles-based intervals and also time-based intervals. So whichever one is the most appropriate for your usage. But some investment here, I think, pays dividends in the future in terms of kind of keeping up with things. Couple more quick slides here, because I know we're starting to get to the top of the hour. These are probably 3 of the most common cleaning products or cleaning questions that we get. How do I treat my black and gray tanks? So there's a product here on the left. A lot of questions on how do I keep my windows from sticking when I try to open the side windows in the Airstream travel trailer. Some 303 protectant is also helpful there. And then how do I wash it? What's safe to use when I wash it? Walburnize is an awesome product that was developed specifically to take care of Airstreams, but any automotive soap that's safe to use on clear coat is good to go. So this next lesson here, lesson number 8, I think is so important. It's really understanding, where to get help. Often the excitement, I think, can get the best of us, and we hit the road without having or being armed with some of the knowledge to be able to solve things when you need it. So this first slide here outlines some of the most common resources that folks will use. And Adamo, I'll let you walk us through this first one. But before you do that, we're talking, Dan was reviewing this deck before we did this. He's like, hey, it's really important to include on the top of this that a lot of the stuff is in the manual. So great resource there, but in terms of the other ones, Adamo, walk us through the top.
Absolutely. And Chris, you might have to reset it again because you're stuck on the maintenance slide. So, but I can start talking through the resources in a little bit of depth, going through kind of first and foremost that when we talk about where to start, forming that relationship with your local dealer, right, is like the most important thing you can do so that they can become sort of a trusted advisor for you along the way. And then knowing that you're on the road, there's also local dealers, right, all over the place. So being able to leverage them as well, if there happens to be one close by as needed when you're on the road, also becomes an amazing tool. But, sometimes those aren't the most the most immediate options to tap into. So Airstream customer service is also just an incredible resource to have. Put it on speed dial in your phone, because as things come up, you can really be able to cover a wide array of topics, or at least be able to get pointed in the right direction to get you that help that you need. And then lastly, CoachNet service, which we actually used several times along the way in our first adventure, because again, we just got on the road and didn't know what we were doing, is a whole nother resource that basically allows people to come out to you, to where you are, depending upon what your needs may be, and help you to get over the hump that you might be experiencing. So between those three, I've had like an amazing experience using them to get the foundational needs taken care of.
Awesome. And Lauren and Daniel, walk us through the bottom row, please.
Sure. So your online resources are really quite vast for your Airstream adventure. One of the ones that we love the most is Airstream Addicts Facebook page. If you as a newbie, you're probably already on it. If you're not, go check it out. It is a group of all of our crazies who are talking about anything and everything Airstream every day. So that's a great resource. We made great friendships through the Airstream Addicts group. There are also other Facebook groups that are dedicated specifically to your model, which is very helpful, especially like when you have a more technical question. No matter what group that you are having conversations in, it is important that you know that there is a search function in these groups where you can go back and actually search for your question. Tow vehicles are a very popular question, and as a newbie, you probably want to know that you don't want to ask unless you search it first, because everyone is very passionate about safety. So the Airstream Addicts group and those subgroups specifically for your unit are awesome. Airstream Academy is produced by Airstream. They're constantly in the process of expanding that. It's great for FAQs. They've got videos. I know that they are continuing to grow that, especially on the model specific side of the Airstream Academy. But it's a really good place to find quick answers and information as well. And then last but not least are the Air forums. So these are more of your like old school style forums from the 90s, but they are specifically about Airstream stuff. So they're another really, really great resource to tap into. Those tend to be a lot more technical questions. So when we're looking for more technical information, we can't find it quickly in, say, an Airstream Addict or an Airstream Academy spot, then that's when we would typically go to Airstream forums. So those are kind of your online resources that you can utilize.
Awesome. And did the slide change?
We're on
Or is
resources
it still-
now number 9. We're good.
Okay, great. So this next one is all about there's more than one way to get there. And it's really around, I think of this as kind of, other than driving it yourself and then driving back. I'm usually in Seattle, so many great places in the West to go out and explore. So I've done a couple trips where I've driven from Seattle all the way down to Salt Lake City and explored southern Utah, had to be back in Seattle for work, and found basically a place to securely store the truck and the trailer. Hopped in an plane back in Salt Lake City back to Seattle, re-met the truck and trailer 3 weeks later. So I didn't have to spend a 2 weeks round trip or 5 days round trip, however long it would take to drive. So that's one option. Another one is I've extended the opportunity for my friends to have their own Airstream trip on the way to southern Utah, and they can drive it down there, and then I can just fly and meet and then only have to drive it back. And then the last one is there are transportation services available that will actually flatbed your truck and your trailer, drop it off wherever you want on the other side of the country, and you hop on the airplane and meet it. So for folks who are looking to maximize experiencing some of the places, some different ways to slice the onion to get there. And our final thing in the presentation in terms of things that every new Airstreamer should know is this idea that it's not one size doesn't fit all. And Adamo, I'll have you kind of talk us through this quickly. This is our last slide before hopefully trying to squeeze into the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we sort of touched on a little bit of this early on. Lauren had mentioned it, but like everybody's different and your comfortability level is different and your personality is different and your engagement with it's going to be different. So if you want to know anything and everything, right, and read through the manual and be proactive about it, fantastic, right? Like that's definitely, there's a place for that. If you want to use the manual as a reference manual, right, and be able to tap into it as needed, that's another approach. Or if as you go and things come up, you have a more reactive approach to life, there is the extraordinary amount of resources, plenty of them that we just kind of tapped into and covered in a little bit high level, but utilizing all those as well. And I think that what we found is we end up using them all together, right? It's again the idea of building a toolkit to figure out what's the most appropriate when, and then being able to use that toolkit to bring your journey to life.
Awesome. Lauren, Daniel, what about you guys?
We've already admitted we are 100% reactive. If you go and watch our YouTube channel, like you'll know that is 100% true. But that's the way we like to adventure. We're very proactive in our workplace, and so therefore that's how we like to, relax. So one of the things that I will say, if you are a more reactive person, it's even more important that you are taking things slow. I would say the quote that would be appropriate here is "Blessed are the flexible, because they will not be bent out of shape." If you are already planning and know yourself as a reactive person when you're airstreaming, make sure to give yourself extra time. We're not really particularly good at that. So one of the things that we do to ensure that we're going to do that is we actually block time off in our schedules. So we know, okay, if we're GPSing a trip and it says 3 hours, we're going to block off 4. And then not only are we going to block off 4, that's only for the drive. We're going to block off an hour in advance and an hour after that, so that gives us plenty of time to set up and break down. So if you are a more reactive person, God bless you, but give yourself space and time.
And if you are a more reactive person, it's all the reason why you probably want to befriend the experts online. I literally have so many friends. We're in an Airstream Classic Series group. I have so many friends that are on my speed dial that I have called literally at like 1 a.m. because I had a question about something, and they've answered and walked me through something. So, it's such a wonderful community of Airstreamers out there. And whether it's Airstream addicts or a specific group, really get out there and engage with other people, because everybody's out there to help each other.
Awesome. I wanted to put up the cleaning slide real quick because I think it might have froze when we did it. So these are the 3 products. Again, we'll make sure this gets right for the on-demand version that we'll publish on airstream.com next week. And I just want to pop up the promo code for Airstream Supply Company. So go ahead and snag that. And the address to submit questions. We didn't have a chance to get to everyone's question. I know that this group was active, especially Dan, in answering questions in the chat. So I want to thank Dan for you taking the time to do that. And Adamo and Lauren and Daniel, thank you for sharing your experience and your knowledge with the community. That's all the time we have for today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.